The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
We're going to be returning education very simply back to the states where it belongs, and this is a very popular thing to do, but much more importantly, it's a common sense thing to do, and it's going to work.
How President Trump's move to dismantle the education department could impact programs in states. And what's in your infant's formula? The new steps the FDA is taking to make sure the products feeding millions of babies is safe. Plus, limiting a Chinese artificial intelligence chatbot, the potential national security risk lawmakers say it poses, and what they want the government to do about it. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and we begin this weekend edition with President Trump, who started the process to dismantle the Department of Education. He signed an executive order that allows Education Secretary Linda McMahon to take several steps to decentralize the public school system. Trump complained that student test scores are down, although the department spent more than twice as much as it did pre-COVID. The process includes cutting the workforce and department infrastructure with the expectation that some key programs will be moved to other federal agencies. Pell Grants and student loans could be administered by the Treasury Department. Programs to educate students who have disabilities could be moved to the Department of Human Health and Human Services. Civil rights oversight in Title IX could be shifted to the Justice Department.
The president believes, as do I, that the best education is closest to the, closest to the student, and we can accomplish that by having it operate out of the state and not trying to manage it from Washington D.C., which clearly, Brett, that hasn't worked. The Department of Education was set up in 1980 by President Carter. We've spent almost $3 trillion. We've seen our scores continue to decline. We're doing something wrong. We need to change.
It would take an act of Congress to completely shut down the Education Department, which would have to overcome the 60-vote threshold of a Senate filibuster. The Justice Department charged 3 people on suspicion of destroying Tesla properties. That includes Adam Lansky, who prosecutors say carried an AR-15 while throwing bottle bombs at an Oregon Tesla dealership on January 20th. In Colorado, Lucy Grace Nelson was charged with malicious destruction of property after Tesla cars were lit on fire at a Loveland dealership. And in South Carolina, Daniel Clark Pounder faces arson and vandalism charges after police there said he lit a Tesla charging station on fire. Attorney General Pam Bondi said the days of committing crimes without consequence have ended. Let this be a warning. If you join this wave of domestic terrorism against Tesla properties, the Department of Justice will put you behind bars. Now to your money, the price of eggs keeps dropping under the Trump administration's plan to bring them down from record highs. New data from Trading Economics shows the average price for a dozen eggs is $3.09 right now. This time last month, that same dozen would have cost you $7.71.
It's astonishing how many chickens were killed in the last 2 months of the Biden administration, and by having a more prudent, Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins has done a more prudent policy about how to manage the disease, then we got lower egg prices and healthier chickens because they're not being culled in millions. Again, remember, it was more than 100-something million chickens were culled, and they spent $2 billion killing the chickens, and if you look at what's happened to the culling since President Trump took office, it's gone almost to zero.
But it may be a little while before you see the drop in egg prices at the grocery store. The New York Times is reporting that wholesale price of eggs has dropped sharply since the beginning of March after soaring for months. But because eggs typically have a 4-week shelf life, it may be the end of March before retail prices start to drop. Some stores may not lower prices until their current inventory sells out. The Social Security Administration is losing more than 2,500 employees to buyout offers. workers. The agency reports those workers signed up to receive up to $25,000 through a voluntary separation incentive. The deadline to apply for buyouts is Friday. Those approved must leave by April 19th. The agency wants to cut 7,000 positions, and nearly 21,000 Defense Department civilian employees accepted resignation offers. A senior defense official said those employees were approved to participate in the voluntary Fork in the Road program. The department is currently in the process of placing those approved employees on administrative leave. The Pentagon is still working on firing probationary employees who have been in their jobs for less than a year. The resignation and firings part of Trump's reduction of the federal government workforce. New developments out of Baltimore. The NTSB issued 4 urgent recommendations nearly a year after the deadly collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Chairwoman Jennifer Homendy says Maryland authorities could have and should have prevented the incident, but failed to conduct risk assessments over the last 3 decades. The pier protection system had not been updated since it was built in 1977, which means it was designed when cargo ships were much smaller.
It was recommended by AASHTO in 1991. It was recommended by AASHTO in 2009. They were part of that subcommittee in issuing those recommendations, and they especially should have looked at the change in vessel traffic, certainly after the 2016 expansion of the Panama Canal.
The NTSB is urging 30 bridge owners to run the numbers on more than 5 dozen bridges across the country. The agency's final report is due this fall. We are seeing a significant drop in deadly drug overdoses in the U.S. The CDC reports from October 2023 to last October, the country saw roughly 82,000 overdose deaths, which actually marks a 25% decline compared to the previous year. And now to a health alert. The FDA will increase testing for heavy metals in infant formula. This comes after testing of 41 products found roughly half had potentially harmful chemicals. The National News Desk, Jeff Harris, has more.
41 types of powdered formula got tested for toxic chemicals like arsenic, BPA, and PFAS. The results, though, came back split. About half had potentially harmful levels of at least one contaminant, but the other half showed no concerning levels. Stephanie Williams, a mother to a 5-month-old little girl, tells us researching the different formulas was quite eye-opening.
It was kind of crazy, just finding the amount of products that are in baby formula that I wouldn't expect to be in it.
From heavy metals to high fructose corn syrup, Williams says she was a bit thrown back.
Just some of the things that just seem like there should be a better option for getting those things.
Charles White, a pharmaceutical expert, says the FDA is now stepping up how it tests heavy metals in infant formula, plus reviewing the nutrients required in these products.
That's going to give them greater regulatory oversight as they get more of these test results.
The announcement comes following test results from Consumer Reports, which found potentially harmful chemicals in roughly half of the formula products.
8 of the 41 products, or about 20%, had excessive levels of arsenic.
The tests also finding BPA and PFAS. But Mark Corkins, a medical expert, says the results weren't overwhelmingly negative.
The majority of them were in a safe range, but some were a little high.
Which is why he believes stepping up testing can be a good thing, although he doesn't believe the results will vary too significantly.
I don't think they're going to find much different, as long as they look at actual science.
Now, RFK Jr. releasing a statement following the announcement saying that the FDA will use all resources and authorities at its disposal to make sure infant formula products are safe for all that use them. I'm Jeff Harris reporting from Washington.
West Virginia could soon pass a sweeping ban on several common food dyes and preservatives commonly used in candy, baked goods, and processed meats. The bill passed the state legislature earlier this month and now sits on the governor's desk for approval. People are finding artificial intelligence more compassionate and comforting than human mental health professionals, according to new research. The Fact Check team's Janae Bowen's joining us now with an overview of this study. And it comes, Janae, as mental health is such a big issue in the U.S.
Exactly, Dee Dee. So on average, an AI-generated responses were rated 16% more compassionate than human responses and were preferred 68% of the time, even when compared to trained crisis responders. Now, this is all according according to that study found in the Communications Psychology Journal.
What is it specifically about AI that resonates more with people than a human mental health professional?
Yeah, so I like how one of the scientists broke it down. They said the AI success is attributed to its ability to identify fine details and stay objective as crisis experiences were described. Now, this made the AI better able to generate attentive communication that gave the user the illusion of empathy. Now, humans may have performed worse because human responders are susceptible to burnout.
I wonder if, like with other professions, AI will work alongside the mental health professional. We'll see where this goes. Janae, thank you. Janae will return in a few minutes with a look at what these new AI findings could mean for the future of mental health care.
Coming up next, tech threat. A coalition of 21 attorneys general call on Congress to put limits on a Chinese artificial intelligence chatbot. Leading the charge is Montana Attorney General Austin Knudsen. We'll have an interview with him coming up next. Twenty-one attorneys general and dozens of lawmakers on Capitol Hill want the government to ban DeepSeek, a Chinese artificial intelligence platform they say poses such a serious national security risk. It's already been banned by many governments around the world. The National News Desk Jan Jeffcoat spoke with Attorney General Austin Knudsen, who is one of the AGs leading the coalition from Montana, where it's already banned on all Department of Justice devices.
First, tell us about this AI platform, how you learned about it, and why it does pose such a national security risk.
Well, here at the Montana Department of Justice, we have to keep a very close eye on our critical infrastructure. We house a lot of sensitive personal data, criminal justice information, so we're constantly monitoring these programs. DeepSeek is yet another attempt by the Chinese Communist Party to hack into America and harvest private information. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's collecting a tremendous amount of personal data. You're logging keystrokes, stuff that's quite sensitive and dangerous from a national security standpoint. And that's why we've banned it here in Montana. That's why we've asked Congress to follow suit.
And this platform quickly surged to the top spot as the most downloaded app after the new year. It quickly got blocked on government devices in multiple countries: Canada, Australia, South Korea, Taiwan. Italy blocked it across the country, not just in the government. I saw a headline this morning, the U.S. Commerce Department has finally banned it. Just curious, why would a lawmaker not want to ban it? Why is this becoming an issue?
I think that's a really good question. I think that'll probably come down to lobbying and who's paying for the lobbying, right? And so in Montana, 2 years ago, we banned TikTok for very similar reasons. And we saw TikTok come into our state capitol, into our state legislature with a great big bag of lobbyist cash to try to sway Montana legislators away from banning that application. I think you're going to see the same thing here if Congress decides to pick this up, and I think they absolutely should. But that's what this would come down to, is lobbying money.
You were out front with banning TikTok in Montana. How does that work when you ban an app on the state level, but it's still available nationally?
So those applications all have the ability to stop downloading within a geographic area. This is actually quite simple to do. My best example is certain states allow gambling applications. Certain states do not. So when you go on the iTunes store or the Google Play store, depending on your geographic location, that app is available for download or not. So this would be really simple to do. But look, we're saying let's just ban this thing nationwide and just be done with it.
Clearly, there are numerous reasons to ban this app, but there are also plenty of apps from China that don't get this kind of attention, that do the same thing. So is there ever going to be a situation where you could ban all apps from China, since they all could be influenced and controlled by the CCP?
Well, I think that's going to be really difficult, right? What we've seen from China is they just keep trying to hack, to steal, to harvest this information from Americans. I think they're going to keep trying different ways, right? We've seen it with TikTok, we've seen it with DeepSeek. They're just going to keep trying at this. So I think it really requires state officials like myself, but the feds too, to be extremely diligent here and keep an eye. The CCP is not our friend. They want this data desperately.
Montana Attorney General Austin Knudsen, we appreciate you joining us here this morning on the National News Desk. Thank you.
Still to come here, lock your car doors. That is the warning police have for residents in one neighborhood. We'll have that story and much more after the break. The National News Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America, from a push to ban the sale of THC in Texas to a warning in Pennsylvania for drivers to lock their cars. We're taking the pulse of America, but we begin in Washington, D.C., where Reagan National Airport recorded a spike in delays following January's deadly mid-air collision.
The Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority Board of Directors met for the first time since January's tragic mid-air collision between a Black Hawk helicopter and an American Eagle plane. They discussed the impact of the tragedy's aftermath. In February of last year, just 11% of arriving flights were delayed, but last month that percentage leaped to 41%. Some restrictions put in place after the collision have been relaxed, but just last week the Transportation Secretary announced other changes will be permanent. Although helicopters will be banned most of the time, anytime one is allowed to fly near Reagan National, 2 of the airport's 3 runways will have to close.
The airport's been working with the FAA and the airline partners to work through the helicopter restrictions to minimize the impacts of those restrictions on the airport itself. Obviously, immediately following the accident, we had increased number of cancellations as increased number of delays. Those numbers are getting better.
We're going to protect the people of Texas from THC.
THC products can be found in more than 8,000 stores across Texas. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick says it's an $8 billion industry that's preying on adults and young people. During a press conference at the state capitol Wednesday, Texas leaders pushed banning the sale of all consumable THC products with Senate Bill 3. Patrick says due to a loophole in a 2019 law, more stores are selling products with dangerous levels of THC like Delta 8. He also spoke of his recent visits to smoke shops and says many of these stores are targeting children.
The idea that they say, well, we have 21 sign on the door, we don't sell, and why are they all opening up around schools? That's where they believe their market is.
Caught on camera, a suspect going from one car to the next, looking for an unlocked door Wednesday morning around 1 a.m. Bingo, this car parked along Walnut Street in Columbia left unlocked, an easy target for this sedan snooper.
But if you keep it locked, they're just going to move on to the next vehicle.
Lock your car doors. It's a simple tip that police are strongly suggesting after a string of car thefts in this exact neighborhood.
I could see a kid come around my husband's truck behind it, another one ran in front of it, and then another one shot through the fence, and we're hopping fences. I've seen people keep, wallets and purses and firearms and medications, and all that stuff can be taken, and I'm telling you, might not ever get it back.
Up next, dark web dangers, drugs, weapons, and tools for committing fraud are all a few clicks away on the dark web. How government agencies are fighting back in our Spotlight on America. The dark web is a marketplace of anonymous websites filled with illegal activity, from the sale of identity theft tools to illegal drugs and worse. Despite efforts by law enforcement to take down bad actors, many continue to thrive. Spotlight on America national investigative correspondent Angie Moreski reports.
Take us onto the dark web.
Getting on the dark web is not something most of us do.
The main sites have mostly drugs, fraud, and digital.
Jacob Lott, an internet security expert and white hat hacker who helps businesses fight cybercrime, guided Spotlight through the complicated process.
You have to use a VPN.
First, using a virtual private network to encrypt your internet location.
Do the Tor browser install.
Then downloading a special browser called the Onion Router or Tor, which blocks the tracking of your movements.
Are you in?
Yep.
Once you're in,
what do you see?
Cocaine, weed, Xanax.
You find many online marketplaces for illegal goods and services.
Stolen credit cards, accounts, passwords, emails, any kind of number of drugs that you can think of, firearms, and other hacking services.
The sale of drugs, weapons, and tools for fraud is rampant, but also much worse.
There's sex trafficking. There's, they're selling a lot of child porn. They're selling things that people are going to put a value on to pay to see or experience.
Incredibly disturbing things Spotlight documented included ads for the sale of human organs, murder for hire, even tickets to watch torture, many images too graphic to show.
It's a group effort to fight the dark web.
It is, and not just domestically, internationally.
The Secret Service is among the multiple government agencies that fight illegal activity on the dark web.
From credit card fraud to sextortion to child exploitation material.
Secret Service Supervisory Criminal Investigator Ken Henderson told Spotlight their agency's role is to investigate financial crimes on the dark web, often going undercover.
Go where the criminals are, see what they're talking about.
So basically, you guys are trying to infiltrate their networks.
Correct, yeah.
Last fall, the Secret Service helped take down a $1 billion Russian money laundering operation where 3 illicit cryptocurrency exchanges were seized. Visitors to those sites are now greeted with this message from law enforcement saying the domain was seized.
The challenge is figuring out who that person is sitting behind the keyboard. Could be somebody down the street, or it could be somebody in Siberia.
While there are successes, investigations can take years.
Is it a matter of these criminals making a mistake? Someone always makes a mistake.
Yeah, and it's sometimes not when they're doing the crime, but when they're just online doing their own personal thing. Sometimes they mix up accounts.
FBI search warrant!
The FBI is another key agency policing illegal activity on the dark web. This video is from a takedown in 2019.
I got some pills over here.
It targeted opioid sales on the dark net and led to 5 arrests in California.
How do you finally get the bad guy?
We've had a lot of success in the past. People taking vacations. They want to use these hard-earned dollars of theirs that they got committing financial crimes, and they want to go lounge on a beach somewhere. Well, we're waiting for them.
The FBI is the primary agency responsible for policing the dark web, especially for those horrific crimes like child sex trafficking. We have requested an interview with them to learn more about their efforts. They told Spotlight they are considering our request. We'll stay on it and report back with any updates. For Spotlight on America, I'm Angie Moreski.
General Motors and chipmaker NVIDIA teaming up to make a new generation of vehicles using AI. GM says it will use NVIDIA hardware in its vehicles for an autonomous driving system and enhanced safety features. The partners will also build custom AI systems for GM's factories and product development. Both companies have faced increased competition from China and uncertainty over tariffs. Amazon is making a privacy change to its Echo devices. The company says starting March 28th, a feature will switch from don't send voice recordings to don't save voice recordings, according to an email sent to customers. Voice requests will still automatically delete, but they will first process to Amazon's secure cloud. Amazon tells USA Today, quote, "The Alexa experience is designed to protect our customers' privacy and keep their data secure, and that's not changing." Coming up next on the National News Desk, talk about a close call. See the shocking dash cam video of a too close for comfort lightning strike. You're watching the National News Desk, America's News. Now, you can catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back. The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected. JFK revelations, with thousands of newly released documents reveal about the assassination of our 35th president. Plus, digital detox, the changes one study found in our brains by just spending 3 days away from your cell phone. Plus, voice clone concerns, artificial intelligence being used to fake phone calls. A cybersecurity expert tells us how you can tell if they're fake or real. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thank you for joining us on this weekend edition. Thousands of documents newly released by President Trump are answering more questions about the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. The National News Desk, Christine Frizzell, has more.
64,000 pages, piquing the interest of historians and everyday Americans alike. The man behind the gun that killed President John F. Kennedy in November 1963, Lee Harvey Oswald, who we've known for years had visited both Cuban and Russian embassies in Mexico City, and who we now know had been monitored by the CIA.
The CIA denied for years knowing anything about Lee Harvey Oswald or following him in any way or opening his mail. Just untrue.
Larry Sabato is the author of The Kennedy Half Century and says from what he's read so far, the newly released files paint a far clearer picture of tensions between President Kennedy and the CIA, which also did not share intelligence with the FBI.
Neither organization told the other what they knew, and most important of all, they didn't notify the Secret Service. Imagine if the Secret Service had known he was working in the Texas School Book Depository building. I kind of think the route would have been changed.
The new files include this letter from a Sergei Sornino, who wrote that in July of 1963, he warned an official in London and then others in the United States about Oswald's plan to kill Kennedy.
We have a tremendous amount of paper. You've got a lot of reading. I don't believe we're going to redact anything.
Some redactions do remain, and it does appear many of those files were made public in a hurried manner, including some sources and methods of intelligence gathering, as well as names, though most involved have long since passed away.
We've also found things they shouldn't have released, like social security numbers. That's forbidden by law, but sure enough, they're in there.
These are by no means all of the files. Some do remain classified, including about 2,400 pages the FBI said last month it had just discovered. I'm Christine Frizzell reporting.
A senior official from the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, is assuming leadership at the U.S. Agency for International Development. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is appointing DOGE's Jeremy Lewin as the USAID's Chief Operating Officer. It comes amid a flurry of legal challenges against DOGE and its efforts to slash the federal government. This includes a ruling this week that determined DOGE's dismantling of USAID likely violates the Constitution. More Americans are starting to think the executive and judicial branches have too much power. According to a new NBC News poll, 43% of registered voters believe the president is too powerful. That's about 7 percentage points higher than what voters said in 2019. When it comes to the Supreme Court and judges, 28% say the judicial branch has too much power, but half of Americans say it has the right amount of power. Most people believe Congress has just enough power. Mexico helped a U.S. law enforcement by handing over a suspect on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Suspected senior leader of MS-13, Francisco Javier Roman Barrales, was caught and extradited to the U.S. FBI Director Kash Patel says this is now the third fugitive on the 10 most wanted list that they have caught since Trump started his second term. A commuter plane crashed on sea ice in Alaska early last month. That was the scene right here. And now a preliminary National Transportation Safety Board report says the Bering airplane was half a ton overweight for the weather conditions. The aircraft flew in an area where moderate icing was possible between 2,000 and 8,000 feet. All 10 people on board died. A final report, including probable causes, can take a year or more after a crash. Shocking video to show you from Atlanta shows one driver's dangerously close call with lightning. You see it here, the driver's dash cam capturing the entire thing. Moments before the strike, the night sky lights up with several heavy flashes of lightning before that bolt just appears just feet from the vehicle. Just imagine that. Luckily, no one was harmed and the driver was free to continue their trip. Well, it may be impossible. No, for me, that's true. For some people to restrict their cell phone use for 3 days. New research looks into what happens if you take a break. The National News Desk, Angelo Brown explains.
For some people, leaving their smartphone at home is their biggest fear. But for brain health expert Dr. Lee Richardson, it's something else.
My biggest fear for addiction in the next few years has to do with cell phones and social media.
So what happens to your brain if you restrict your phone use for 3 days? New research may hold a clue. A new study reported by Science Alert followed 25 young adults, 18 to 30 years old, restricting cell phone use for 72 hours. Their brain activity monitored. They were shown images of smartphones. Brain changes were observed linked to reward processing and cravings, similar in some ways to brain signals connected to substance addictions.
So what does that tell us, just in layman's terms, that when you're just seeing the phone can set off a thrill?
What it tells you is that you're at risk for becoming a little bit too dependent upon that phone.
The latest numbers coming from the CDC found about 1/2 of teens had 4 hours or more of daily screen time, a battle some parents fight every single day. The former Surgeon General offering this advice.
If your kids are already on social media, establishing technology-free zones in their day to protect sleep, in-person interaction, and physical activity.
The research published in Science Direct also found several participants reported improved mood and quality of life after 72 hours of smartphone restriction. In Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
A growing threat right now in the world of artificial intelligence is voice cloning scams. Within seconds, your own voice can be stolen and then used against you. Joining Jen Jeffco to discuss is cybersecurity expert and privacy attorney Lisa Garber.
Nearly a million so-called granny scams were reported last year to the Federal Trade Commission, so this is clearly nothing new, but it is becoming so widespread now that it's not just individuals, but now corporations who are facing a real threat with accounts being taken over and call centers targeted. So tell us how this technology works.
Granny scam is such a woeful misnomer. Unfortunately, that's what we have to go on. What's happening is that voice clones are becoming more achievable through artificial intelligence-backed applications and software. What happens is scammers can take what sounds like your voice or a loved one's voice, usually a son, daughter, family member, and they call you and say, we're in crisis. We need money. Either it's for bail or a hospital bill, something that's an emergency, and you need to act fast. And it's hard to tell if that's actually your loved one's voice. So what they're doing is they're acting on our natural impulses in crisis to help a loved one. And unfortunately, it's very easy for them to clone or copy any individual's voice with these new AI applications. And what we found is that with only 3 seconds of audio to analyze, these applications can come up with an 85% match of your voice.
It's frightening. I was just talking to my producer about this. I'm glad you called it a misnomer when we hear granny scams, because everybody is falling victim to this. So how can you tell if it's real or fake?
It's very hard to tell if it's real or fake. And the FTC actually ran a competition last year for different tech companies to try to create a solution, whether it was to detect it on the back end or come up with something that could authenticate your voice. We're still working on these products, and there are a few out there, but as the FTC said, there is no silver bullet.
It's so widespread. Research shows scammers have stolen hundreds of millions of dollars, with many victims unaware of this, but even those who are aware still have fallen for it. So when investigators are looking into these types of cases, how hard is it to find the culprits?
It's nearly impossible, unfortunately, because the whole goal, they're acting just like hackers, right? These cyber criminals are staying under the radar. They're using every technology possible to remain anonymous. And they're also targeting everyday people for arguably smaller amounts of money. then would be worthwhile to go after. And the FTC is covering many investigations. They're also looking at telephone companies to try to block illegal calls better. We all get those scam calls every minute of the day. But the problem is it's very difficult to trace these people because they're operating on anonymizing technology.
How can we safeguard ourselves then, or at least reduce the risk from these scams?
Here, there are some laws in place protecting biometrics, or those identifiers that are that authenticate us as individuals, like your retina, your iris, and your voice, which is known as your voice print. But really, our best defense here is common sense. And what I mean by that is when you get that emergency call, try to verify what's going on. It's always helpful to have a safe word or a code word with your loved ones. Really set that up now, but also check. We had a scam that took place against an established Philadelphia lawyer recently that made the news because the one red flag that set him off was the person asked for payment via Bitcoin, and that seemed funny to him. So use common sense to verify what's going on.
Cybersecurity expert and privacy attorney Lisa Garber, thanks for joining us this morning. Have a great weekend.
You too.
People think AI counseling responses are more compassionate and comforting than human counselors, according to a new study in the Communication Psychology Journal. Janae Bowens and the Fact Check team is back to discuss, so it's also a lot more affordable. Could this fill the gaps?
Well, it could, Dee Dee. So there is a need for more mental health care. According to the World Health Organization, more than 2/3 of people with mental health conditions don't get the care they need. In low and middle income countries, that figure rises to 85%. Now, AI, as you said, is a more affordable option and could potentially be available at any time during the day, unlike a human.
But at the end of the day, though, this is technology. This is not a human. So break down the potential risks with this.
Yeah, so Live Science reports turning to AI for this sort of care could damage a person's human relationships. An expert says AI can be flirty, insightful, enlightening, fun, provocative, forbearing, and accessible to the point where it's impossible for any human being to measure up. There are also privacy concerns. If bad actors got access to this information, this could lead to attacks and demoralization.
So interesting, for some concerning how realistic this has all become. Janae, thank you. For more on this Fact Check Team topic, including links to their sources, scan the QR code on your screen or visit thenationaldesk.com. Still to come, our team of correspondents breaks down this week in Washington, from the controversial dismantling of the Department of Education to President Trump's demand of the Federal Reserve ahead of more planned tariffs.
And welcome back. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day, and our team of correspondents reports on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. President Trump signing an executive order that will dismantle the Department of Education. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins, what is that expected to look like once they get underway?
So, Steve, this is President Trump fulfilling another promise he made on the campaign trail. But shuttering the department completely will require an act of Congress. But what this executive order does is it gives Trump's education secretary, Linda McMahon, the power to start the necessary steps to turn the power back from the federal government to the states when it comes to education. Now, the Department of Education does still have services, and Secretary McMahon says those services will still be administered. They just envision this as being administered through different agencies. So, for example, and I think we have a graphic here for you all, a big chunk of the cost of savings would be in eliminating the workforce of this department structure. And the expectation is that these key programs will just be moved to other agencies, like Pell Grants and student loans could be administered by the Treasury Department. Programs to educate disabled students could be moved to the Department of Health and Human Services. Civil rights oversight and Title IX would then be shifted to the Justice Department. Now, this plan does still have plenty of critics. For example, Randy Weingarten, she's the president of the American Federation of Teachers, has said they're concerned that you actually need somebody who knows what they're doing about education specifically to administer all of those programs, and that's why the Department of Education is the right place for this to happen.
We'll be watching very, very closely over the next coming weeks and months. Meanwhile, President Trump's deportation of hundreds of Venezuelan alleged gang members causing friction here in the U.S. and elsewhere. National correspondent Christine Frisell, tell us about that.
Yeah, Steve, this is the story that dominated much of last week, starting last Saturday when we found out the Trump administration had deported 261 people it says were members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, plus some MS-13 gang members. They were sent to a prison in El Salvador, paid $6 million from the U.S. government to keep them for at least a year. President Trump citing the Alien Enemies Act for the reason he was able to do this without due process or a way to prove that they were actually criminals or gang members, as he said. Well, a judge intervened, issuing a temporary restraining order, and then the real battle kind of began. All week, questions swirled about if those orders were ignored or if the planes had actually already taken off and landed. The Venezuelan government accused Trump of kidnapping his citizens, even though, saying that he was returning to the time of slavery. And now he has a website up for people to report what he calls unjust deportations. That country, by the way, threatened with new sanctions for refusing to take its own citizens back. This is a deportation escalation that ended up intentionally or unintentionally raising some really massive constitutional questions that have not yet been answered, centered around whether the president of the United States is ignoring the rule of law.
And from immigration to the economy, as the world waits for President Trump's next round of tariffs in a couple of weeks, jitters throughout the economy in the U.S. and around the world. Here at home, Trump calling on the Fed to help with keeping the economy stable. National correspondent Audra Elnishar, what's the latest there?
Well, remember, the Federal Reserve is meant to be independent from politics, but that's not stopping the president from taking to Truth Social and criticizing the Federal Reserve for the decision they made this week to keep interest rates stable. Now, we're seeing two sort of conflicting forces happening with monetary policy and the president's fiscal policy. Of course, the Federal Reserve's mandate is to stabilize prices, aka bring down inflation. Well, like you mentioned, President Trump's got these massive tariffs coming out, which by pretty much every economist and executive's account will bring up prices for the American people. So one effort wants to bring down prices, the other will, as a consequence, bring up prices. Now, of course, the latter is not going to be politically popular. Voters don't like inflation. Nobody does. And the president, and his advisors are starting to publicly acknowledge that there will be some, as they're calling it, economic disturbance. So clearly the president is putting pressure on the Fed to lower interest rates, potentially to make up for any inflationary pressure that will come with his tariffs. Now, the Fed does not have to listen to him, and they certainly won't. In fact, they don't even meet again until over a month after his April 2nd tariffs kick in. Those are expected to hit trading partners all across the globe. So it was, some rhetoric coming from the president that likely won't have any practical impact. As far as Fed policy that'll impact Americans and their interest rates, as things stand right now, the Fed's expected to cut rates twice more by a quarter point sometime this year. However, what we heard from Jay Powell, the chair of the Fed, is that the level of uncertainty in his words right now is remarkably high. So things could change. Expectations for short-term inflation are going up. Things are really unsteady right now, and even he said it's because of the uncertainty pointed towards coming from tariffs, because it's not just tariffs coming from the White House, it's all the retaliatory tariffs coming back from trading partners.
And of course, political will be watching very closely to see what Americans' tolerance is for that uncertainty and potential pain with the economy, especially as we get closer to the midterms next year. Audra, Christine, Kayla, great reporting as always. Thanks for your hard work. Back to you.
Coming up next here on the National News Desk, caught on camera, a porch pirate in Utah is starting a life of crime at an early age. We'll explain coming up next. This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. From solar farm runoff destroying a Virginia man's property to a girl stealing packages in Utah. We're taking the pulse of America. But we begin in Alabama, where volunteers are helping neighbors who lost everything after a tornado outbreak.
I was in shock. To know that there was not more damage done was absolutely a work of God to me.
The EF1 tornado in Calera Saturday night had a path length of nearly 10 miles. It left no reported fatalities or injuries, but caused damage across the city. This is one of the homes struck by the tornado. The owner thankfully not home when the storm came through. It left the mobile home in ruin. The next morning, hundreds showed up to help.
I got out here about 7:30 yesterday morning, and the streets were already filled with people already.
Serving food with her church to those impacted and the volunteers. She said within hours, more donations were coming in than they knew what to do with. And how the community came together in someone's darkest hour makes a statement.
It just shows you that people do care, and it shows that people are ready to help others in time of needs.
Kenneth Elliott built his home in 1987 on his own slice of Central Virginia paradise with a lake outside of his front door. In 2022, the Depot Solar Farm moved in next door. He says that's when everything changed. Elliott and his brother-in-law, Daryl Worley, say the solar farm itself isn't the problem. It's the retention ponds.
All the water from those retention ponds run into my lake.
If it's done right, you can live in harmony and it's okay, no problems. This is not harmony. This is not done right.
They say the farm's operation has ruined the once idyllic property and something needs to be done.
This lake never looked like this. It's never, ever looked like this.
Elliott says he's tried to get answers, but he hasn't had any luck.
Having something done through these people, it's almost impossible. It is impossible, put it that way. It's been impossible.
So the little girl approached our door very timidly. She looked nervous. She's young. You can see that she's young in the video. And she kind of makes a curve around our camera, but then she looks right up into the camera, grabs it, and takes off running down our lawn.
Another neighbor captured the same girl placing Post-it notes over doorbell cameras. In each video, a different outfit, some with face coverings, others without.
So she's changing clothes. It's kind of interesting, which makes me think, there's older people behind it.
Fields' package stolen 7 minutes after it was delivered.
Yeah, definitely makes me think that they're just following behind the UPS driver and hitting them as they're dropped.
As for the child caught on camera,
it's really kind of sad. It makes me sad for the girl that she's being put in that situation.
Still to come, back on Earth, 2 American astronauts return home after an unexpected 9 months in space. Finally, NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams are back on U.S. soil after one of SpaceX owner Elon Musk's SpaceX Dragon capsules safely brought them back from the International Space Station after 9 months in orbit. Musk thanked the work of his team as well as NASA bringing them back home.
Thanks to the excellent work of the SpaceX team working with NASA, the astronauts are now safely home. And so congratulations to the SpaceX NASA teams on excellent work and a huge note of appreciation to President Trump for prioritizing and expediting their return.
Williams and Wilmore spent 285 days on board the ISS, but they also orbited around Earth 4,576 times and traveled over 121 million miles while in space. So glad that they are back home. That'll be all for us on the weekend edition of the National News Desk, America's News. Now, don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Check our local listings. You can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of the National News Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. And from all of us here, have a great week.